The night of the 2025 CFDA Fashion Awards was supposed to be glamorous, unforgettable, and filled with the glittering energy of Hollywood's elite. The red carpet shimmered under the harsh glow of countless cameras, each flash promising to capture perfection, elegance, and charm. But nobody, not a single person in that glittering room, expected what would unfold when Meghan Markle made her entrance. Who invited her? That question would echo louder than any applause or camera shutter, louder even than the music and laughter filling the grand hall. And yet, no one could have predicted just how violently the room would respond, or how the story would explode across social media within minutes. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine being there. You're surrounded by fashion icons, celebrities whose names alone could command attention. Designers in their tailored tuxedos, actors in haute couture gowns, models whose faces are instantly recognizable the moment they walk in. The air is electric, buzzing with anticipation. And then, a figure appears. She glides across the carpet with her signature poise, the cameras immediately snapping, the crowd murmuring. But it's not the usual murmuring of admiration. There's tension in the air, a ripple that grows into a wave of hostility. Within seconds, the whispers turn into audible groans. And then, someone, a voice sharp and unmistakable, cuts through the din and delivers the line that would define the night. Who invited you? The words hang like a dagger in the air, sharp, cutting, impossible to ignore. The moment is almost cinematic, yet it is all too real. And while Meghan's carefully curated image has long been a subject of public fascination, this night would mark a turning point. It wasn't just the words themselves. It was the way the room seemed to collectively, almost viscerally, reject her presence. Cameras captured her subtle flinch, the almost imperceptible tightening of her smile, the eyes darting to see who had dared to speak. For Meghan Markle, this was no ordinary night at a fashion award ceremony. It was a storm that would leave its mark, not just on her career, but on her very reputation. But why would a room filled with some of the world's most polished, elite, and experienced celebrities react this way? After all, Meghan had walked red carpets before. She had attended events with titans of fashion and Hollywood royalty alike. And yet, this night was different. Some insiders whispered about lingering tensions from past feuds, rumored disputes over fashion decisions, and whispered grudges held by those who had once welcomed her warmly. Others hinted at a growing resentment, a backlash fueled by media portrayals and public fascination with Meghan Markle's every move. Was it jealousy, fear, or had something more personal sparked the explosion? To understand the magnitude of the moment, you need to see it not just as a single comment or a fleeting wave of boos, but as a cascading series of events that built from tension to whispers to outright hostility. It started subtly, a pause, a half-smile that didn't quite reach the eyes of those around her. Then a murmur, a subtle shift in the room as people began to notice the tension. And finally, that voice, slicing through the polite chatter and the flashes of the red carpet. Who invited you? A single sentence, yet it reverberated with the force of an accusation, a public questioning of belonging. And the reaction wasn't limited to the walls of the awards hall. Within seconds, social media lit up. Clips of the moment went viral, shared across platforms with captions dripping in shock, judgment, and curiosity. Twitter exploded with outrage and debate. Instagram stories painted the scene with dramatic retellings, some sympathetic, some scathing. TikTok creators replayed the moment with commentary, dissecting body language, tone, and the subtle hints of tension visible in Meghan's expression. Within the hour, the hashtag #WhoInvitedMe was trending worldwide. It was a moment that bridged the gap between celebrity culture and public spectacle, a reminder that no one, even Meghan Markle, could escape the gaze of the masses. But there's more beneath the surface. Because this story is not just about a single night, a single comment, or even the reaction of a room full of Hollywood elites. It's about the culmination of years of media scrutiny, carefully constructed public personas, and private tensions that the cameras never capture. It's about the narrative of Meghan Markle as it exists in public consciousness, a narrative that oscillates between admiration and suspicion, between fascination and disdain. And this night, at the 2025 CFDA Fashion Awards, that narrative collided with reality in a way that no one expected. So why does this story matter now? Because in 2025, Meghan Markle's influence, her brand, and her public persona are more valuable and more fragile than ever. Every appearance is scrutinized. Every gesture, every word, every outfit, every smile is dissected, discussed, and judged. The CFDA incident is not merely a momentary lapse or an isolated clash. It's a crystallization of the ongoing tension between perception and reality, between expectation and execution. It offers a lens through which we can examine not only Meghan Markle herself, but the forces that shape the way celebrities are received, celebrated, or shunned in the public eye. And the story doesn't end with the booze or the viral clip. Behind the glitz and glamour, there were backstage whispers, subtle confrontations, and interactions that the cameras never caught. Designers who had once welcomed her politely were reportedly rolling their eyes. Celebrities who had previously smiled in photos were exchanging knowing glances, and staff members whispered among themselves, shocked by the sudden tension. The air backstage was thick with unspoken stories, each more revealing than the last. It is in these moments, away from the cameras, that the real drama unfolds, the moments that define reputations, shift alliances, and set the stage for future controversies. And as the night progressed, things escalated. The initial murmurs and boos became louder, more pointed, more impossible to ignore. Conversations froze when she walked by, subtle gestures of disapproval became impossible to hide. And then, there were the whispers of secrets revealed, alliances questioned, and rumors confirmed or denied, in hushed tones that only insiders could hear. The night was no longer just about fashion. It was about power, influence, and the unspoken rules that govern the glittering, cutthroat world of celebrity. But what truly made this night unforgettable wasn't just the public shaming or the viral moment. It was what came after. The reactions, the interpretations, the gossip that would ripple across the media, transforming a single sentence into a story of scandal, intrigue, and rivalry. And the twists didn't stop at the red carpet or backstage. They spilled into social media, into private conversations, and into the very way Meghan Markle would be perceived moving forward. So what actually happened that night? How did a single phrase, "Who invited you?" ignite a firestorm that reached far beyond the red carpet? And more importantly, what were the hidden tensions, the whispered secrets, and the backstage confrontations that made this moment inevitable? We'll explore all of it. Every glance, every whisper, every subtle gesture that turned a glamorous event into a defining moment in Meghan Markle's public life. But here's the question you need to ask yourself. How could one night, one room, and one sentence carry so much weight? How could it expose so much about the fragile balance between celebrity and scrutiny, admiration and judgment, perception and reality? And the answer is something we'll uncover together. By the end of this story, you'll see the CFDA Fashion Awards of 2025 not as a simple celebrity event, but as a turning point. A night where alliances were tested, reputations shaken, and one woman's image forever altered. And the first step of this journey begins with understanding the chaos, the whispers, the boos, and the stares. The moment Meghan Markle walked into the room, and the world collectively reacted in shock. But what came next behind the scenes? The moments the cameras didn't capture, the words whispered in private, the alliances strained to breaking, would change everything. And no one saw it coming. The CFDA Fashion Awards are not just another night on the social calendar. They are the Oscars of fashion, a place where designers are crowned, celebrities are idolized, and the world watches, waiting for someone to make a statement that will be remembered for years. Every year, Hollywood's glitterati, fashion royalty, and A-list celebrities gather under the grand chandeliers of a venue dripping in elegance, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. But 2025 would not be remembered for the glamour, the gowns, or even the speeches. It would be remembered for one explosive moment, the night Meghan Markle walked in, and the room erupted. It started like any other high-profile awards ceremony. Limousines lined the streets, engines humming under the bright lights. Photographers and paparazzi jockeyed for position, flashes illuminating the red carpet in rapid succession. Fans gathered behind barricades, hoping for a glimpse of their favorite stars, clutching phones and cameras like lifelines. The air was thick with perfume, ambition, and an unspoken tension that comes with an audience that knows every detail will be analyzed. Designers in tailored suits and dresses strutted past, their faces composed but eyes alert, scanning for rivals, allies, or just the perfect camera angle. Models glided effortlessly in heels, gowns flowing like liquid silk, their posture perfect, smiles rehearsed, eyes calculating. The CFDA Awards were a world of calculated appearances, where one wrong move could ripple across social media for months. And then came Meghan Markle. Her arrival was quiet at first, a glimmer of movement in the sea of flashbulbs. But within moments, the attention shifted. Cameras pivoted, whispers rose, and the subtle, collective anticipation of the room grew into something tangible. Meghan appeared poised, elegant, her gown chosen with the meticulousness of a seasoned fashion strategist. Every accessory, every subtle curve of the fabric, every hair in place, it was all carefully calculated. But despite the perfection of her appearance, there was an energy in the room that even she could not ignore. The subtle shifts in posture, the tightened jaws, the sideways glances, the barely concealed scoffs, it all built tension, a pressure cooker waiting to explode. At first, the reactions were small and almost imperceptible to an untrained eye. A designer would murmur to a colleague, laughter masking the sting of a quiet insult. A model would glance away as Meghan passed, pretending distraction but failing to hide their discomfort. Even seasoned photographers, accustomed to celebrity entrances, paused slightly, sensing the unusual charge in the room. Something was different this night. Something had changed. And as the crowd waited for the glamorous start of the awards, Meghan Markle had unknowingly stepped into a storm. The tension was almost cinematic. You could feel it in the space between flashes, the faint rustle of silk and taffeta, the quiet shift of bodies adjusting in chairs. Then, it began to escalate. Small whispers became audible murmurs became snickers, and before long, a ripple of dissatisfaction turned into outright hostility. The subtle signs of disapproval were amplified by the eyes of 1,000 spectators, each with their phone pointed, each ready to capture any sign of weakness. And in the midst of this charged atmosphere, the words were finally spoken. "Who invited you?" That sentence struck like lightning. Sharp, sudden, public, and in a room built for appearances, the bluntness of it was almost unbearable. Meghan's carefully maintained composure flickered, just slightly, a tightening of the lips, a flicker of the eyes toward the speaker, a momentary pause that said everything. The crowd reacted immediately. Some laughed, some gasped, some whispered, but the energy had shifted irreversibly. This was no longer a red carpet arrival. This was a battlefield, a test of poise under fire, and Meghan Markle was the unwitting general facing an army she had not anticipated. Behind the cameras, the scene was even more volatile. Staff members who had spent hours preparing the event whispered frantically into headsets, ensuring the evening's proceedings would continue without interruption. Event coordinators tried to maintain calm, but the atmosphere had changed. Designers who had once been amiable now exchanged tense glances, quietly discussing what had just happened. Celebrities who were normally composed began to fidget, shift weight from one foot to another, and glance toward the source of the disruption. Every movement Meghan made was analyzed, dissected, and judged in real time. And while the room itself became a stage for tension, the audience outside, the public, the fans, the social media followers, was already witnessing the fallout. Live streams captured the reaction, and within minutes, clips of Meghan's entrance, juxtaposed with the infamous question, were being shared worldwide. Comment sections flooded with speculation, outrage, support, and ridicule. Hashtags began trending within moments. The CFDA Awards, already a global spectacle, became the epicenter of a social media firestorm. A single moment, a single question, had spiraled into a phenomenon that would dominate headlines for days. But the real story isn't just the public reaction. It's the undercurrent, the subtle dynamics, the whispers of insider conflicts that had been building for years. Because this room, filled with fashion elite, was not just filled with admiration and applause, it was filled with history. Old rivalries simmered beneath the surface. Professional grudges, jealousies, and past disputes created a pressure cooker environment. And Meghan Markle, despite her poise and experience on red carpets, had stepped directly into the center of it. Some insiders hinted at long-standing tensions between Meghan and certain influential designers, dating back to prior collaborations that did not go smoothly. Others spoke of subtle rivalries with celebrities who felt she had overstepped her bounds, or with personalities who believed she was claiming a spotlight that wasn't hers to claim. The whispers of backstage drama suggested that what we saw on camera was only the tip of the iceberg. Behind the cameras, Meghan was navigating a minefield of expectations, judgments, and subtle sabotage. The crowd's reaction, then, was as much about past history as it was about the moment itself. It was a culmination of whispered grievances, silent judgments, and the unspoken rules of elite social gatherings. And the public? They only saw what the cameras captured, a poised figure met with audible disdain. But the reality, the true drama, was layered, intricate, and far more explosive than the world could immediately comprehend. So as Meghan made her way into the awards hall, each step was weighted with tension. Each camera flash captured not just her image, but the silent reactions of a room ready to judge. Every glance from another celebrity, every whispered conversation, every smirk or eye roll became part of a narrative that was forming faster than anyone could contain it. It was a night that would be remembered, replayed, and analyzed endlessly. And yet, this was just the beginning. Because while the booze and the question, "Who invited you?" became the viral moment, the true drama was only just beginning. Behind the glitz, behind the smiles, and behind the cameras, the night was about to escalate in ways no one anticipated. Secrets would be whispered, alliances tested, and reputations challenged. And Meghan Markle, elegant and poised though she may have been, was about to face the full force of a room that had already made its judgment. What unfolded over the next hour, interactions, confrontations, and unspoken betrayals, would shock everyone. And by the end of the night, the CFDA Fashion Awards of 2025 would no longer be remembered as just a celebration of fashion. They would be remembered as a battlefield, a moment of social reckoning, and a defining chapter in Meghan Markle's public life. But what came next, the moments captured away from the cameras, the whispers that flew behind the curtains, the private exchanges that set the world buzzing for days, would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The first signs were subtle, almost imperceptible, like ripples on the surface of a still pond before a storm hits. You might have missed them if you weren't paying close attention. But the insiders, the photographers, and even some seasoned celebrities sensed it immediately. There was a shift in the room as Meghan Markle made her way further into the CFDA Fashion Awards hall. The atmosphere, previously charged with excitement and glamour, suddenly carried a tension so tangible it could be sliced with a knife. And it started with tiny things, the flicker of an eye, the barely audible murmur, the quick glance exchanged between attendees. At first, it was easy to dismiss. Someone coughed at the wrong moment. A chair scraped against the floor too loudly. But soon, the pattern emerged. Snippets of conversation, half-smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes, whispered comments like, "Not again," or "Here we go." Meghan, ever the observant figure, noticed it. Her posture remained perfect, her smile composed, but even the most trained social skills couldn't fully mask the awareness of disapproval. It's the kind of subtle contempt that seeps into a room unnoticed at first, only to spread until it becomes undeniable. The murmurs began to escalate. A designer known for her biting wit muttered something under her breath, audible only to the nearest colleagues, and yet enough to be caught on a nearby microphone. A model, standing near the stage, rolled her eyes in a way that spoke volumes. Photographers, used to capturing perfection, hesitated before taking shots, sensing that this wasn't going to be the typical red carpet moment. Even event staff, trained to anticipate chaos, felt a shift in energy that set their nerves on edge. And then came the laughter. Not polite applause or gentle chuckles, but subtle, almost mocking laughter. It spread like wildfire, catching those nearby off guard, building into an audible reaction that the room could no longer ignore. Someone whispered behind a hand, "Really? She's here again." Another voice, a bit louder, added, "Did she even get an invite this time?" The words weren't meant to be heard by cameras, But in a room as tightly packed and acoustically designed as the CFDA Awards, whispers travel fast. And Meghan, trained in diplomacy and charm, knew that whispers like these were far worse than outright confrontation. There's a unique cruelty in subtle contempt. It doesn't erupt like a storm. It creeps. It isolates. It forces the subject to navigate a minefield where any misstep is amplified. And Meghan Markle, walking with the elegance of a seasoned celebrity, found herself suddenly the center of this silent storm. She moved carefully, glancing at familiar faces, trying to find reassurance in friendly nods, only to be met with quick smiles that didn't reach the eyes or hurried excuses to look away. It was a social rejection magnified 100-fold under the scrutiny of the world's press. It's important to understand that this wasn't random. This was the culmination of years of whispers, rumors, and unspoken rivalries. Some insiders hinted at jealousies over previous red carpet moments where Meghan had overshadowed long-established figures in the industry. Others mentioned fashion disputes, projects that didn't go as planned, collaborations gone sour, or offhand comments she made that were taken out of context. And the room, full of people who thrive on power, influence, and perception, was ready to remind her that elegance alone doesn't always guarantee acceptance. By the time Meghan reached her seat, the subtle contempt had evolved into something more visible. People leaned back, crossing arms in silent disapproval. Eyes darted toward her every few seconds. A designer sitting across the room pinched the bridge of her nose, exhaling sharply as if to say, "Here we go again." Even the event's host, normally skilled in managing tense atmospheres, seemed momentarily unsettled, glancing at security with a hint of concern. And yet, the public, watching through the lens of live streams or clips later shared online, might have thought it was just another celebrity event. A poised woman entering a glamorous hall. But insiders knew the difference. They could see the undercurrent, the electric tension building like static before a lightning strike. It was a room full of admiration turned into quiet resentment, admiration tinged with judgment, and fascination entwined with suspicion. It wasn't long before these signs of contempt turned into more overt gestures. A subtle shift in conversation when she passed by. Chairs adjusted to create physical distance. Quick glances exchanged between attendees, eyes narrowing slightly, jaws tightening. It was as though the room collectively said, "We see you. We know your history. And we're not impressed." Meghan maintained her composure, but the mental toll was evident to those paying close attention. Small cracks appeared in her expressions. A forced smile that lingered too long. Eyes flicking nervously toward someone she hoped would offer support. Hands gripping a clutch just a little too tightly. It's these micro-moments that reveal a person's awareness of the social terrain around them. And in this case, it was clear. She knew she was being judged, tested, and scrutinized, not for her fashion choices, but for her very presence. And then it happened. Someone, an attendee whose name would later make headlines, decided to vocalize the sentiment that had been simmering in the room. The words were sharp, cutting, and impossible to ignore. "Who invited you?" The phrase, simple in construction, carried the weight of contempt, judgment, and social ostracism. The timing was impeccable, delivered with just the right mix of surprise and venom to maximize impact. The reaction was instantaneous. The room's subtle disapproval erupted into audible shock, whispers, and gasps. Cameras pivoted, capturing the moment for live streams and social media in real time. People in the immediate vicinity froze, unsure of whether to laugh, scowl, or avert their eyes. And Meghan, trained in public composure, momentarily faltered. Her smile tightened, her eyes widened slightly, and for the first time that night, the poise that had served her so well showed a trace of strain. And yet, the moment was only partially captured by the cameras. Behind the scenes, the tension grew in layers. Designers whispered to colleagues, gossiping about past slights or perceived arrogance. Celebrities who had once smiled at Meghan's arrival now exchanged meaningful looks, subtle but loaded with judgment. Event staff felt the shift in energy, their movements more cautious, their attention divided between the stage and the brewing social storm. Social media, as expected, exploded within minutes. Clips of the incident circulated online, each replay dissected, each frame analyzed. Fans debated, some defending Meghan's grace under pressure, others mocking the audible disapproval. Hashtags began to trend globally, fueling a discussion that blurred the line between fashion critique and personal attack. And yet, for all the public attention, the private, backstage story remained largely hidden. Because while everyone saw the moment, only a few understood why it happened. Only a handful knew of the history, the rivalries, and the subtle undercurrents that had led to this eruption. And for Meghan, every glance, whisper, and gesture became part of a narrative she could not fully control. It was more than a red carpet incident. It was a social test, a moment that challenged her position within the elite circle she had entered. And so the night continued, the initial wave of contempt not abating but growing. Every step Meghan took, every interaction she attempted, was met with subtle resistance. Conversations paused as she approached. Laughter became more nervous, smiles more tentative. The room had collectively decided. She was an intruder, and her presence would not be ignored, celebrated, or quietly tolerated. But the most striking part of all this was the anticipation of escalation. The audience, insiders, and even Meghan herself sensed that this was only the beginning. The room, the event, the ceremony, it was a powder keg, and the first spark had already ignited. What came next, the whispers, the confrontations, the subtle manipulations, would escalate in ways no one expected. And one moment, one interaction, would push the night into territory that would become impossible to ignore. The first signs of contempt were just the opening act. The main drama, the real spectacle, was about to begin. And as Meghan continued to navigate the crowded hall, her every move weighed and measured. The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. How far would the disapproval go? How public would the fallout become? And who, among the elite audience, would decide to push the tension over the edge? The night had begun as a celebration. By the time the first awards were announced, it had already transformed into a test of resilience, perception, and poise. And the answers, the confrontations, the secrets that would surface in the next hours, were closer than anyone realized. The CFDA Fashion Awards of 2025 were about to become unforgettable, not for fashion, but for the storm that had quietly, inexorably, begun to rage. But what came next? The first overt confrontation, the whispers that would ignite viral controversy, the reactions captured behind the scenes, would change everything. And no one could predict how explosive the night would truly become. The words echoed through the room like a gunshot. Who invited you? Just 3 words. Yet, in that moment, they felt like a verdict, a sentence pronounced in front of everyone. For Meghan Markle, it was more than an insult. It was a challenge, a public questioning of her very place in this elite gathering. But who had actually said it? That question would dominate discussions, gossip columns, and social media threads for days, sparking endless speculation. And the mystery of the speaker's identity only added fuel to the fire. It started as a ripple, a subtle murmur barely audible over the soft chatter of the CFDA hall. Then, as Meghan made her way to her seat, the words cut through the ambient noise, crisp and deliberate. There was a precision in their delivery, a confidence that indicated the speaker knew exactly the effect those words would have. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't playful teasing. It was an assertion, a claim that Meghan Markle did not belong here, and that everyone present was complicit in the unspoken rule. The immediate reaction of those around was revealing. Chairs shifted. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Eyes darted, trying to pinpoint the source of the statement. And for Meghan, it was disorienting. She had been in the public eye long enough to handle paparazzi, critics, and hostile press interviews. But this was a social ambush, and it was happening in real time, with hundreds of onlookers who were just as quick to judge her as the person who spoke. Speculation immediately ran rampant. Who had the audacity to say those words in front of an entire crowd of industry leaders and celebrities? Was it a designer with a long-standing grudge? A fellow celebrity who felt upstaged? Or perhaps a socialite notorious for stirring drama? No one knew for certain. But in the hours that followed, multiple insiders claimed to have seen the exchange firsthand, each providing their own version of events. Some insisted it was a high-profile designer, known for her sharp tongue and unapologetic criticism. Others hinted it was a celebrity who had previously clashed with Meghan over a charitable initiative or red carpet moment. The lack of clarity only amplified the drama. Meanwhile, the cameras caught Meghan's reaction, though not perfectly. Her expression tightened. For a fraction of a second, the poise she carried so effortlessly seemed to falter. Her eyes scanned the room, trying to locate the speaker, to confront them, to measure the intent behind the words. But the room was large, crowded, and chaotic. The source remained elusive, hidden behind faces that smiled politely or pretended not to hear. The audience outside the venue, the millions watching online and on live streams, were left with fragments. Clips showing Meghan's initial flinch, the slight tightening of her jaw, her subtle attempt to maintain composure. Social media erupted within minutes. The hashtag #WhoInvitedYou began trending worldwide, accompanied by thousands of memes, analyses, and conjecture. People debated endlessly about tone, intention, and context. Was it a playful jab gone wrong? Or was it an intentional act of public humiliation? Every angle was examined, every frame paused, every word dissected. But there was more than just public curiosity at stake. Within the industry, the question carried real consequences. Fashion is a world where perception defines influence. Reputation is currency. And a single public slight, whispered or shouted, can reverberate across contracts, collaborations, and invitations. Whoever had said those words, intentionally or not, had ignited a controversy that could shift power dynamics in ways no one anticipated. Insiders reported that immediately after the statement, the room's energy changed. People who had been chatting animatedly went silent. Designers exchanged knowing glances. Celebrities shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the awkwardness growing more palpable with every passing second. It was as if the words had punctured the carefully curated bubble of glamour, exposing a raw layer of human judgment, envy, and rivalry. And yet, Meghan's response was subtle but calculated. She maintained her posture, smiled politely, and continued toward her seat. There was no outburst, no confrontation, no dramatic retaliation. But every subtle gesture, every careful placement of a hand, every graceful adjustment of her gown, was a study in composure under pressure. Observers noted the way she engaged with photographers without looking flustered, the way she acknowledged fellow attendees while keeping a measured distance. It was a masterclass in poise, though it did not erase the sting of the words directed at her. Backstage, the reaction was no less intense. Staff and assistants who had worked tirelessly to orchestrate the evening whispered among themselves. "Did you hear that?" one murmured. "Who would even say something like that?" Another replied. Security discreetly scanned the room, ensuring that no confrontation escalated beyond control. And designers, known for their keen perception and ability to influence trends, began quietly discussing who had made the comment, debating motives and implications. Every corner of the CFDA event seemed to carry a piece of the tension. Some reports suggested that the words were not entirely spontaneous. According to insiders, there had been a subtle undercurrent of dissatisfaction with Meghan's attendance, rumors of long-standing rivalries, and whispers of previous disagreements that had never been fully resolved. Some attendees may have felt emboldened, seeing this as a perfect opportunity to assert influence, to publicly mark boundaries, and to remind Meghan Markle and the world where she stood within this exclusive ecosystem. And so the words lingered, not just in the air of the awards hall, but in every conversation that followed. Social media clips captured the moment repeatedly, allowing audiences to replay, dissect, and debate endlessly. Public commentary ranged from shock to amusement, from outrage to admiration for Meghan's restraint. Each new post, each new analysis, amplified the tension and kept the story alive in the public consciousness. Meanwhile, the real drama was unfolding in ways that no camera could capture. Behind the stage, designers whispered about past grievances. Celebrities exchanged cautious glances, weighing how their reactions would be interpreted in both public and private spheres. Event staff tried to navigate the logistics of the evening while avoiding becoming embroiled in social politics. Every movement Meghan made was scrutinized, every interaction evaluated. It was no longer a celebration of fashion, it was a live demonstration of social power, influence, and the precarious balance of reputation. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this moment was how it encapsulated the complexity of celebrity culture. Here was a woman who had been admired, criticized, scrutinized, and adored in equal measure. She had faced media storms before, navigated political scrutiny, and handled public debates on her personal life. Yet in that room, a single question, 3 words, carried the force of judgment, gossip, and historical context all at once. And it was delivered with such precision, such timing, that it became impossible to ignore, impossible to deflect, and impossible to control. And as Meghan settled into her seat, the room still buzzing from the echo of the question, everyone knew this was just the beginning. The moment would ripple outward, shaping social media discourse, influencing public perception, and setting the stage for further interactions that would test her patience, poise, and ability to maintain control. Every glance, every whisper, every side conversation that followed was now laden with the weight of those 3 words. The mystery of who spoke them remained unresolved in that instant, adding a layer of intrigue that would captivate audiences for hours and days. Speculation continued. Was it a seasoned designer? A high-profile actress? A socialite looking to assert dominance? No one knew. The ambiguity only made the situation more electric, more newsworthy, and more impossible to ignore. And while Meghan appeared composed to the cameras, the reality was far more complex. Each second that passed was filled with tension, anticipation, and the subtle threat of escalation. The first audible contempt had been voiced, and it had landed like a bombshell. But what came next? The subtle confrontations, the private reactions, the interactions no one captured on video, would escalate the drama to a level that no one, not even the most seasoned insiders, had predicted. Because in the world of fashion, image is everything. Perception is reality. And in that moment, Meghan Markle's image, and her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of elite celebrity, was being tested like never before. The question of who invited you was no longer just a line. It had become a gauntlet thrown, a challenge accepted, and a spark that would ignite a series of events that were as dramatic as any red carpet gown. But the night was far from over. The subtle contempt that had begun in whispers and glances would grow into something undeniable, explosive, and unforgettable. And the identity of the speaker, the full context of their intent, and the subsequent ripple effects would become the story that everyone would be talking about for months to come. The first words had been spoken. The first cracks in the polished veneer of the CFDA Fashion Awards had appeared. And the next moments, the confrontations, the reactions, the backstage revelations, would turn a glamorous event into a defining moment in Meghan Markle's public life. But what came next behind the cameras, in the hallways, and in private whispers, the parts that social media never captured, would shock everyone. And no one could have predicted just how explosive the fallout would become. If the red carpet was the opening act of the night, the backstage corridors of the 2025 CFDA Fashion Awards were where the real drama was brewing. While the cameras captured Meghan Markle's poised entrance, flashing lights, and the infamous "Who invited you?" moment, the unseen corners of the hall were a different world entirely. Tension pulsed like electricity behind the velvet ropes, weaving through the shadows of dressing rooms, makeup stations, and wardrobe tents. Every whisper carried weight, every glance was loaded, and every footstep seemed to echo judgment. The backstage area was a hive of activity, and in normal years, it was a place of organized chaos. Stylists scurried with gowns and accessories, makeup artists dabbed final touches, assistants carried racks of carefully curated outfits, and designers hovered over their protégés, adjusting hemlines and smoothing fabrics. It was a place of perfection, where every detail mattered and timing was everything. But this year, that perfect rhythm was fractured the moment Meghan arrived. The whispers began almost immediately. A designer, glancing over at Meghan's gown, muttered to an assistant, "Do you see her choice tonight? Bold, but risky." The assistant nodded, but her eyes betrayed unease. Not because the gown was inappropriate, but because the room's energy was charged with something beyond fashion critique. Subtle comments about etiquette, presence, and belonging began to circulate. Staff who had been trained to stay neutral felt the tension. Even security, typically invisible except during moments of genuine threat, noticed the shift. There was a collective awareness that something was off, something volatile. And then came the first small confrontations. Celebrities and designers who had previously smiled in Meghan's direction now avoided her gaze or exchanged side glances with colleagues, murmuring, "Not her again," or "Here she comes." One model, notorious for her quick wit, whispered to a friend, "She's always so calculating. It's exhausting." The friend laughed nervously, glancing toward Meghan, who was several feet away but moving through the space with a confidence that seemed almost unaware of the undercurrents. But Meghan was not oblivious. She had been in the public eye long enough to read subtle social cues, micro-expressions, half-smiles, tense shoulders, eyes darting away, and she sensed immediately that the atmosphere had shifted from polite acknowledgement to quiet hostility. The challenge was now clear: navigate a room brimming with judgment, criticism, and resentment without breaking composure. And she did so with precision, every step measured, every nod deliberate, every smile calibrated to maintain grace under pressure. Yet the tension only intensified when she approached designers she had worked with in the past. There were polite greetings, a handshake here, a nod there, but underneath the veneer of courtesy was a web of unresolved grievances. Some designers had long harbored jealousy over her red carpet moments, where her carefully chosen gowns had stolen the spotlight. Others had felt slighted by perceived criticisms or personal opinions expressed in interviews. These subtle tensions, simmering for months or even years, were now coming to the surface. And Meghan, despite her experience, had become the focal point for all these unspoken resentments. Staff movement backstage became more cautious, almost choreographed in response to the charged atmosphere. Assistants hesitated before speaking, stylists lingered near wardrobes rather than mingling with the crowd, and makeup artists whispered instructions instead of shouting them across the room. Every interaction seemed to carry the weight of potential confrontation. A spilled bottle of perfume, a misplaced garment, or even an unintended glance could become a catalyst for drama. The environment itself had become a test of control for both Meghan and those around her. One insider later described the scene as a powder keg, noting that the combination of elite egos, rivalries, and the viral red carpet moment had created a perfect storm. It wasn't just about who was present, but who felt entitled to be there, who believed their status was threatened, and who saw an opportunity to assert dominance. Designers exchanged knowing glances, models whispered about her every move, and assistants quietly expressed relief when Meghan was out of sight, even briefly. And then came the moments of subtle sabotage. Reports suggest that a stylist, who had previously worked with Meghan, made deliberate adjustments to her ensemble, minor enough that it wasn't noticeable to the cameras, but enough to unsettle her. Accessories were shifted, hemlines brushed differently, and jewelry was repositioned with an almost imperceptible shift that would catch the eye of those attuned to detail. Was it intentional? Possibly. But in a room filled with egos, envy, and tension, the line between accident and design was blurred, and every small imperfection became amplified. Meanwhile, conversations around her were a mixture of gossip and strategic observation. A designer leaned toward a colleague and whispered, "Did you see how she handled that comment? Impressive, yes, but calculated. Always calculated." Another added, "She knows every camera, every angle, every reaction. That's what makes her dangerous." Even as Meghan moved gracefully, every step was scrutinized, every expression dissected, and every gesture analyzed. Backstage, the energy had shifted from celebration to competition. Every participant knew that appearances mattered, but this was about more than appearances now. It was about status, influence, and power. Security, trained to prevent physical disruptions, noted the subtle signs of tension. Small clusters of people seemed to be whispering more urgently, a few faces visibly flushing with irritation or excitement. It wasn't violent, but it was charged. The room was alive with silent judgments, calculated observations, and social maneuvering. Every movement Meghan made seemed to be magnified, every reaction she displayed parsed for meaning. In the world of fashion, perception is everything, and the backstage had become a battleground for it. The tension reached a peak when someone reportedly let slip a comment loud enough for Meghan's inner circle to hear. "She's out of her league tonight." The words, simple but potent, carried layers of contempt and rivalry. For those who heard it, there was no mistaking the intent. The comment was a calculated reminder that despite her status as a celebrity and former royal, she was still being measured, scrutinized, and judged by people who understood the rules of this exclusive world. And yet, Meghan's response remained controlled. Her team navigated her to her seat, shields up, smiles intact, posture perfect. But the mental chess she was playing was exhausting. Each micro-expression from the crowd, each subtle smirk, each barely audible comment added pressure. She knew that one misstep, one flicker of irritation, or one reactive gesture could be magnified, broadcast, and analyzed in the public domain. And with social media ready to pounce on every moment, the stakes were enormous. Even the small victories were tinged with tension. When a fellow attendee offered a polite nod or smile, Meghan returned it graciously, and the cameras captured it. But backstage, the dynamics were far more complex. A designer who had smiled publicly rolled her eyes the moment Meghan passed by. A model who had posed alongside her for photographs whispered an aside to a friend that suggested lingering resentment. Every gesture had dual meanings, one for the cameras, one for those watching from the shadows. In this charged atmosphere, minor incidents became amplified. A stylist adjusting a hem, a jewelry clasp that wouldn't fasten properly, a momentary misstep on the carpeted hallway, all became fodder for gossip, speculation, and viral commentary. And for Meghan, the challenge was not only to maintain composure, but also to navigate the subtle hostility, the whispered judgments, and the ever-present threat of public scrutiny. Backstage drama, in many ways, is far more revealing than what appears on camera. It exposes true allegiances, hidden rivalries, and subtle acts of sabotage that the public rarely sees. This night was no exception. As Meghan continued to move through the hallways, flanked by her team, the tension only grew. Every interaction, every whispered comment, every glance became part of a story that would eventually make headlines and dominate social media for days. And yet, the climax of this backstage turmoil had not yet arrived. The murmurs, the subtle gestures, and the quiet rivalries were building towards something explosive. Insiders whispered that a confrontation was inevitable, that the simmering resentment in the room would find its outlet, and that the next incident could be far more public, far more dramatic, and far more consequential than the initial, "Who invited you?" The scene was set. The players were in place. And while Meghan navigated the backstage corridors with grace, the storm was only just beginning to take shape. What would happen when whispered contempt escalated into direct confrontation? Who would challenge her next, and how would she respond? The backstage drama of the CFDA Fashion Awards of 2025 was far from over, and the next twist would shock everyone. The CFDA Fashion Awards were meant to be a celebration of talent, creativity, and style. Celebrities, designers, models, and influencers gathered under the glittering chandeliers with an air of excitement, anticipation, and mutual admiration. Cameras flashed, gowns shimmered, and the red carpet sparkled as if the world itself had conspired to create a perfect tableau. But by the time Meghan Markle entered the venue, that perfect image began to fracture, and the reactions of the room's most influential figures, celebrities who were usually masters of charm and composure, would become the story everyone talked about for weeks. The moment she appeared, some of the room's most elite figures froze. A high-profile designer, known for her sharp critiques and ruthless professionalism, whispered under her breath, "She's here again." The whisper, subtle to the untrained ear, carried weight. It was a blend of surprise, resentment, and barely concealed contempt. A well-known model seated nearby leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing as if calculating the potential fallout of Meghan's presence. Even actors accustomed to handling media scrutiny seemed momentarily flustered, their smiles tightening as their gaze lingered just a fraction too long, betraying curiosity or judgment. Among the first reactions was subtle shock. Several celebrities instinctively leaned closer to each other, their conversation halting mid-sentence as they observed Meghan's calculated movements across the room. Was she prepared for what was coming? Was she aware of the murmurs, the stares, the tension hanging in the air? It was impossible to tell. But the room responded as though a ripple had spread through water, tiny disturbances magnifying into waves of scrutiny. For many, the infamous line, "Who invited you?" was still fresh in their minds. Some reacted with disbelief, covering their mouths or exchanging glances. Others smirked knowingly, as though the comment validated long-held opinions. One actress, seated several rows behind, whispered audibly. Finally, someone said it. The words carried amusement, but also a hint of approval, revealing the layers of opinion that existed behind the polished exteriors of the attendees. The reactions were not limited to whispers. Some celebrities displayed micro-expressions that spoke volumes. A designer's brow furrowed slightly, her lips pressed in a tight line, and her hand twitched as if ready to intervene, but restrained by decorum. An actor raised an eyebrow, glancing at a colleague for confirmation, silently asking, "Did you hear that too?" Even photographers noticed the tension, capturing images that would later circulate online. Glimpses of side-eye glances, subtle smirks, and restrained expressions that communicated judgment without a single word spoken. Humor, too, played a role. Some celebrities, perhaps to diffuse their own discomfort, exchanged small jokes under their breaths. One model muttered, "Well, that's a bold entrance," eliciting a stifled laugh from a fellow attendee. Yet the humor was laced with irony, acknowledging the tension without directly addressing it. It was an unspoken acknowledgement of the divide forming in the room, a divide between those who supported Meghan, those who disapproved, and those caught somewhere in between, unsure which side to take. And then there were the direct reactions. A celebrity who had previously collaborated with Meghan leaned over to a colleague and whispered something inaudible to the crowd, though the tone was unmistakable, judgmental, dismissive, and sharp. Another celebrity, known for her theatrical expressions, tilted her head slightly, narrowed her eyes, and crossed her arms, a body language signal that was instantly recognizable as disapproval. These subtle gestures, small as they seemed, amplified the intensity of the night. The audience watching online or via live feeds saw snippets of these reactions, often without context. Clips of Meghan passing by celebrities who smirked, tilted their heads, or whispered to each other went viral within minutes. Fans debated endlessly. Were these gestures playful, supportive, critical, or outright hostile? And with each new clip, the story gained traction, growing from a simple red carpet moment into a cultural phenomenon. Social media, in this instance, magnified every reaction, turning micro-expressions into newsworthy events and small whispers into viral commentary. Even seemingly neutral figures played a part. Celebrities who were neither allies nor rivals could not escape the scrutiny of the crowd. Some chose to smile politely, maintaining the appearance of decorum. Others avoided eye contact altogether, pretending distraction, subtly signaling that they, too, recognized the tension. In the theater of elite celebrity gatherings, neutrality is rarely invisible. It is observed, analyzed, and interpreted, often with unintended consequences. But the reactions went beyond mere expressions. Some celebrities, emboldened by the atmosphere, engaged in subtle acts of confrontation. A high-profile designer moved strategically to block Meghan's path, forcing her to navigate around clusters of people. Another celebrity positioned themselves deliberately near the cameras, ensuring that any interaction with Meghan would be captured from an angle that might suggest tension. These calculated movements, though subtle, contributed to an invisible web of social pressure, one that Meghan had to negotiate with every step she took. And then came the whispers of alliances forming in real time. Several celebrities who had a history of collaboration or friendship with Meghan appeared to consult discreetly with each other, exchanging glances, subtle nods, or coded gestures. Were they planning to intervene, to offer support? Or were they trying to gauge how far the tension might escalate before choosing sides? These unspoken communications added a layer of intrigue, creating a complex social map that only those in the room could fully decipher. The media, of course, was quick to capture every detail. Photographers focused on micro-expressions, reporters scribbled notes on body language, and bloggers live-tweeted every gesture that seemed unusual or noteworthy. The pressure of scrutiny was immense, and for Meghan, it was impossible to ignore. Every smile, every nod, every graceful maneuver of her gown was being interpreted as a statement, a stance, a declaration. The room itself had become a stage, but unlike the literal stage of the awards ceremony, this was a performance where the stakes were reputation, influence, and social power. And yet, amid all the tension and judgment, there were glimpses of support. A few celebrities, perhaps mindful of public optics or personal loyalty, offered subtle signs of solidarity. A nod here, a smile there, or a whispered comment of encouragement provided brief moments of relief. But these gestures were often drowned out by the larger wave of scrutiny, leaving Meghan to navigate a landscape where approval and disapproval were constantly in flux, and the line between friend and foe was blurred. By the time the first awards were announced, the room had shifted dramatically. The initial surprise and murmurs had evolved into a dynamic mix of tension, judgment, and fascination. Cameras continued to capture the moment, but the real story lay in the interactions, gestures, and expressions that only insiders could fully appreciate. The celebrities themselves became actors in a drama that no script could anticipate. Each reaction, each glance, each subtle shift in posture contributing to a narrative that was unfolding in real time. And as Meghan accepted her seat and tried to focus on the awards, the reactions around her continued to ripple outward. Small clusters of celebrities whispered, laughed quietly, or exchanged meaningful glances. Designers subtly adjusted their positions, ensuring they were seen in a favorable light while signaling subtle disapproval. Every movement was scrutinized, every reaction parsed, and every gesture added fuel to the growing story that would dominate headlines for weeks. The evening, initially intended as a celebration of fashion and talent, had transformed into a showcase of social power, influence, and subtle rivalry. The reactions of the celebrities, ranging from shock, amusement, disapproval, and subtle support, were as integral to the story as the awards themselves. And while Meghan maintained her composure, the intensity of the room made one thing clear. Nothing about this night would be ordinary, and every interaction would carry weight beyond the glitz and glamour of the event. But what came next, as whispers evolved into direct confrontations and private rivalries threatened to spill into public spectacle, would push the drama to levels that no one anticipated. And the reactions that had only just begun to surface were only the beginning of a night that would become unforgettable, not for fashion, but for the storm brewing among Hollywood's elite. The CFDA Fashion Awards had always been a spectacle, a moment for the fashion industry to shine and for celebrities to demonstrate their impeccable taste. But by the time Meghan Markle entered the room and faced the infamous "Who invited you?" moment, the event had taken on a life of its own, one that extended far beyond the walls of the glittering hall. Within minutes, social media became a frenzied arena where reactions, memes, analyses, and gossip collided, creating a storm that even the most seasoned publicists couldn't anticipate. To understand the scope of the eruption, consider this. In the age of instant connectivity, a single viral clip can reach millions within seconds. Cameras captured Meghan's composed entrance, juxtaposed with the audible reaction of the audience, and that moment was immediately uploaded to platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Within 5 minutes, hashtags began trending. By 10 minutes, clips were being shared globally, accumulating thousands of comments, likes, and shares. Hashtag #WhoInvitedMe became a shorthand for the collective shock, amusement, and intrigue of the public. The immediate social media reaction was a mix of chaos and curiosity. Fans of Meghan Markle rushed to defend her, posting comments about her poise, professionalism, and composure in the face of hostility. Others, however, used the viral moment to critique her presence, her public image, or even her fashion choices that night. Some threads exploded with speculation about who had delivered the infamous line, fueling endless debate. Every platform became a stage for commentary, analysis, and judgment, amplifying the original incident far beyond the walls of the CFDA venue. TikTok, in particular, turned the moment into a short-form spectacle. Clips of Meghan walking the red carpet, paired with the audio of audience reactions and the whispered insult, were remixed with captions ranging from humorous to biting. Users dissected every micro-expression, her smile, her eyes, her subtle body language, and turned the footage into trending content. Memes quickly proliferated, some sympathetic, some mocking, and some surreal, exaggerating the moment for comedic effect. Each meme contributed to the narrative, shaping public perception in real time. Meanwhile, Twitter exploded with hot takes. Fashion critics, celebrity journalists, and influencers weighed in, sharing opinions that ranged from supportive to scandalous. Some posts analyzed her gown choice, suggesting that it was deliberately provocative. Others focused on her demeanor, debating whether she had handled the confrontation gracefully or overplayed her composure. Every reaction amplified the tension, transforming what had been a fleeting in-person moment into a digital phenomenon with real-world consequences. Instagram stories provided another layer of commentary. Attendees who had live-streamed or posted behind-the-scenes glimpses of the event added context, showing Meghan interacting with staff, walking past other celebrities, and subtly responding to the murmurs around her. These posts offered insight into her strategies for maintaining poise while the room tested her patience, and they fueled additional debate. Fans and critics alike dissected every angle, every glance, and every gesture captured on camera. The viral nature of the moment was further intensified by the use of commentary and reaction videos. YouTube creators uploaded analysis videos within hours, pausing the footage to examine Meghan's micro-expressions, hypothesize about the speaker's identity, and theorize on the implications for her career and public perception. Live-stream discussions flourished, with hosts and guests debating whether the moment signaled a turning point for Meghan's influence in Hollywood or simply another minor scandal amplified by the media. And the public attention wasn't limited to fans and creators. Major news outlets, both domestic and international, quickly picked up the story.